empowering middle managers to be leaders, employee cell phone protocols, and bringing team building to the dairies. That's where we're heading up today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. My name is Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will uplevel your skill set and your mindset so you can be a top performer in the dairy business. Bridget Schilling from Schilling Farms in Darlington and Montfort, Wisconsin, is back with us today. On episode 53, she talked about getting a new team on board while taking on a second dairy. And today we are tapping into the tips and tools she brings to the table from her professional management role in nursing to now handling human resources and employee relations for the operation that includes 2,100 cows and 30 employees. So whether you manage a single site or multiple locations, I think you're going to find some great takeaways for developing leaders, building teams, and some pretty creative ways to get it all done. Here's where Bridget focuses her time and talents at Schilling Farms.
I have more hands-on with employees in Montfort than I do in Darlington. I do spend time with employees in Darlington. I help facilitate employee meetings monthly. If somebody calls in and we need to find a replacement, I will help with that. But Montfort, I spend several days a week there, talking with employees, spending time in the parlor, getting to know them. And then also I do leader meetings. So we have 3 shifts. We milk 3 times a day. So I do leader meetings every other week just to see what's going on, what's going well and what's not. What do we need to do to help things that aren't going well, letting them know that they're supported.
Here's how Bridget is empowering team leaders and middle managers to step up, delegate, and a creative way of creating a cell phone use policy.
I talk a lot with the leaders, and we talk about something monkey business and how, as a leader, I don't want to take on every problem that they have. So when the shift leaders started, we talked about this monkey business because they were having issues with everybody coming to them and telling them problems. And I learned this through a leadership thing that I went to. Somebody brings you a monkey or their problem, and you're petting the monkey, and it's so nice, and you just love the monkey, and you give it a banana, and you put it on your desk. Well, and pretty soon so-and-so comes in, they tell you their problem, the monkey. You're petting that monkey. Now you got 2, totally manageable. Before you know it, you've had 15 employees in your office. You have 30 monkeys all over. They're pooping, they're eating, they're yelling at each other and fighting, and you have all of this chaos. It's always interesting to me when they tell me things that they hear me say, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you are listening to me. It's not like my kids where it goes in one ear and out the other. You're hearing some of this stuff, which I sometimes think they're like, oh my gosh, she's talking about petting monkeys and feeding it bananas. Who are you? But it's true. There are leaders that you take all this stuff on. Well, you can't do that as a leader either. You have to, I want to enable them and empower them to work together. In nursing, it was a team sport. If I saw a coworker doing something like, oh, hey, we should do this differently, or, especially when it came to safety or not following a procedure or something, tactfully say, hey, let's try this. And I try to do that with the employees as well. Hey, so-and-so, we aren't jiving when we work together. I feel like I'm picking up a lot of the slack. We'll have that conversation. One thing I will say is that the 3 leaders, so we just implemented something new. So the leaders I've been with up until about 6 weeks ago, they would try very hard to deal with issues at their own, have those tough conversations. And eventually, and I would say, if you get to a point where I need to intervene, let me know. And, we would have those conversations of, yep, cell phones tend to be a big issue. And I finally got to the point where it was no cell phones in the parlor at all. Because if they're going to be a distraction, period, then we can't have them in there. I know emergencies arise and I know things happen. But being in your pocket and being on your phone when you're supposed to be doing your job. That was the other thing I did during a staff meeting one time, and they were all like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she did this. I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, but I had my cell phone on the table. And this was one of the meetings where we were talking about cell phone usage. And I told my sister-in-law, I said, can you leave and call me in 2 minutes? So Brittany is in the middle of interpreting during this meeting, and I answer the phone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you? And she looked at me and she was like, what are you doing? Like, couldn't believe that I answered this phone call because I don't do that. And I looked at everybody in the room because they were all like, because they thought maybe Brittany was going to like get up and walk out because she was just like, couldn't believe, because it's disrespectful. And I always joke with them. I said, well, what would it look like if you're in the doctor's office and the nurse just answers their phone like that? What does that feel like? So anyways, everybody's eyes are really big and they're looking at us like, what is going on? And I looked at everybody and said, how does that feel? And they're like, that was really like uncomfortable and rude. And I said, okay, that's no different than you being in the parlor, being on your phone or texting and you're ignoring the cows and you're not doing your job. So like that real time, like this is what this feels like. And that's what it feels like to me. Like we have to do our job when we're here.
That demonstration set the stage for a team building activity on the topic of respect.
The same day I did the phone call in the middle of the meeting, I had everybody write down in Spanish on a note card what respect was, what respect meant to them. And everybody wrote it on a card and we handed it in and I had Brittany read them all. And, you know, I did one, Brittany did one, and we just talked about what that felt like. And having mutual respect for one another, you know, whether it's in a team atmosphere, you know, me as a leader, the leaders in the group. So we've done that. And the other thing we did was I don't know what the name of the actual game that you play, but you take spaghetti noodles and masking tape and string, and you have to be able to make it support a marshmallow on the top. And it's so fun. And it's interesting because you have to, like the leader was hands off, could give directions, but you just had these different roles. And then we talked about it afterwards, like what it felt like. And it was great to hear them laugh and working together and like, oh my gosh, the spaghetti noodles are breaking, and you know, just kind of like observing how it was going. And then talk about, it was interesting too, because as the leader wasn't supposed to help, but as they progressed, the leader ended up getting hands-on because they had to be. There was like all hands on deck. How do we figure this out? And they always loved to teach me Spanish too. So marshmallow is bonbon. So we had to get the bonbon on the top. So it was, you know, those things are great for me too. I love watching that. And I don't know if they hate it or not. They always, like I said, they always laugh at me because they're like, what is she going to do? I have another one that we're going to do at the next meeting that is making a paper chain, but you can't talk. Like, and what does that feel like when you don't have communication? So you don't have any communication, you have all the tools in front of you, and how do you do that without communicating? And just talking about why that's important, because sometimes we struggle with like the guy in the back who's scraping and the milkers, and how are we working together, and is it going well? So that's my next one. Again, I had to develop trust, so they didn't think I was nuts right away. So as we progressed, then we started. I feel like constantly talking to them, and that's the other thing. And I did this as a nurse. I don't stand and preach. I sit down at a table and we talk together. I don't stand in front of them. That's not my style. I feel when you stand, you're lecturing or you're preaching, and that's not ever my intention. And there are certain settings that's very appropriate. When I practice as a nurse, or I'm one-on-one with an employee, or even during these meetings, I sit at the table with them. I always feel, like I said, nursing's a team sport. So is so many professions. I can't do my job without somebody doing the bookwork. I can't do my job without somebody milking cows. I can't do it without somebody checking who's pregnant, somebody feeding the babies. We all have to work together. We all have a role that is intertwined to be successful. When I stand and preach, I feel as though I'm above them. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's just the way that I feel. I don't want to preach at somebody.
Even with team building and meetings, new challenges come up on a dairy. One Bridget is working through right now involves shift pay versus hourly pay.
When we're done with our shift and everything's cleaned up, because we've had some people kind of linger around and wait and not want to leave. They had an 8-hour shift that they were paid for previously, so they want to keep that 8-hour shift. We tried going to shift pay and we took it away because then employees were rushing through. And then we were struggling with mastitis. Now it was also change of season. It was summer. It was old sand. There were like all these things going on. So was it just the shift pace? So how do I level with people losing out on money? Because if they are done an hour earlier, so when they had shift pay, they were getting done sooner. Now we're back to hourly pay. They want to be paid for their 8 hours, but they are done sooner than that. So I'm struggling with that a little bit. How do I say I'm going to take 5 hours a week away from you? That's 5 hours of income for them. So I know why they're doing it. How do we work through that? So that's been a challenge right now. That's my challenge right now, and something I'm working on. It's also affecting the dairy. That's money we're paying them. They're not being efficient. How do we work through all of that stuff? Again, that's where key players come into that. And I will always say, that's fine. We can do that. I don't know. The dealing with other humans and lives is a double-edged sword too. And I think the other thing is I've heard like, oh, they're replaceable. That theory I hate because there are people that truly work at the dairy that truly care about it and want to be there. Are there some that are just there to collect a paycheck? Yeah, I'm sure that there are, and that's okay. That's in any industry. There are some that are truly there because they care and they do a great job. So, do you sacrifice efficiency for quality? Do you sacrifice quality for efficiency? Again, double-edged sword. I don't know the answers to all of it. And again, it's not perfect and I don't have all the answers. I just kind of go along and do the best that I can. We have people show up at the farm all the time looking for a job. We also have other employees get recommended to us. So we don't have any shortage of help out there. Finding the right fit for us, I think, is the other challenge. Like I said to you earlier on, I let 2 people go recently. So coming up to this podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to talk about employees and all this. And I let 2 people go. I think with that, I had many conversations about things that were going on and had this like paper trail of, hey, here's what wasn't going well. We've talked about it. It hasn't changed. I felt confident in the decision that they weren't the right fit for the dairy, but it does then send this like uneasiness through everybody. Like, oh my gosh, because I let 2 people go in a short amount of time. And I had somebody I'd reached out to and he had said, maybe space them out. And then I was like, well, I don't know. So I did it all at once, but then everybody was kind of like, oh, who's next? So I did say, nobody else is being let go. We have a behavior standard and what we're looking for, this was not followed. So unfortunately, they were let go. And just letting them know that this just didn't fit. And it never means that person is a bad person or, it just wasn't the right fit for the dairy.
You just heard from Bridget Schilling, who handles the human resources for Schilling Farms in Darlington and Montfort, Wisconsin. From empowering team leads to cell phone policies to building teams to evaluating hourly versus shift pay and even employee termination, I hope you have gathered a few insights to help you navigate managing people and building effective teams on this episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. And to hear more from Bridget, head back to episode 53 where she talks about getting the culture at the dairy's second site caught up to speed with her nursing and management background. This is Peggy Coffeen from the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and if you'd like to receive the Uplevel Dairy Podcast right in your inbox, go ahead and head over to upleveldairy.com and subscribe to join the Uplevel Dairy community. Thanks for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.